Hello, and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Today's movie is 1955's Bride of the Monster, written and directed by the one and only Edward D. Wood, Jr. The film tells the story of Dr. Erich Varnov, an expatriate scientist from an unnamed country who is now making his home in an equally unnamed, forsaken jungle hell that's apparently about 20 minutes outside of Los Angeles. He's obsessed with creating a race of super beings to take over the world, but unfortunately, every time he tries to create one, his test subject ends up dead. He has a mute assistant, the appositely named Lobo, and a pet octopus, since no self-respecting mad scientist would have a pet like a goldfish or a puppy. When a couple of local hunters disappear around the site of the old Willows place where Varnov lives, the cops assign their top man, Lieutenant Dick Craig, to the case. Dick's girlfriend is Janet Lawton, one of those nosy female reporters that you always hope will end up getting killed at some point in the movie, but never do. Janet, ignoring her fiancé's advice to stay out of it, winds up getting captured by Varnov, and you can guess the rest. Stephen King once said, if you're a fan of horror movies, you have to develop a taste for good baloney, and that is true. I've been a fan of horror movies ever since I was a kid, and as a result, I've eaten a lot of baloney. While this film may not be mortadello, it's at least Oscar Mayer. The movie stars Bela Lugosi, whose career we covered before, so let's concentrate on writer, producer, director of this trek, Ed Wood Jr. Edward D. Wood Jr. operated on the outside fringes of Hollywood for his entire career. In the 80s, he was voted worst director of all time in the Medved brothers' book, The Golden Turkey Awards. I myself don't think Wood is the worst director of all time. Prime examples of true contenders would be Andy Millikan or Coleman Francis, but I have to admit that I have a certain respect for Ed Wood. Don't get me wrong, as a writer, producer, director, the man had barely any talent at all. But what he lacked in talent, he made up for in enthusiasm. Just the fact that he was able to get his movies made at all speaks volumes for his gifts as a salesman. Bride of the Monster, originally entitled Bride of the Atom, was Ed Wood's second movie, and the second to star his good friend Bela Lugosi. Ed got the money for the movie from Donald McCoy, a local meatpacking magnate, who insisted on two things: that the movie end with an atomic explosion, and that his son Tony play the lead. Any of you are familiar with the work and life of Ed Wood knows two things that seemingly everyone who's heard of him knows: that he was a transvestite and that he had a fetish for Angora. This fetish rears its head in just about every movie Ed ever made, and this one is no exception. When Lobo rescues Loretta King after her car hits a tree, she's wearing an Angora beret. Lobo-like! That friend of low-budget producers, stock footage, plays the octopus in Bride of the Monster in most of the movie, but in scenes where it actually has to kill someone, stock footage wouldn't do. Ed Wood, being the inventive person he was, gathered the men of his stock company together and raided Republic Studios in the middle of the night, stealing the prop octopus they created for a movie called Wake of the Red Witch. It had been hanging from the ceiling for a good number of years, and when they brought it down, one of the tentacles snapped off, so it's really a septopus. In addition, they couldn't figure out how to work the motor that made the septopus wriggle its tentacles, so the actors were forced to lay on top of it and pull the tentacles around themselves as they struggled for life. If you take a close look at the instruments in Varnov's laboratory, you'll see just how inventive Ed Wood and his people could be. In addition to the usual mad scientist trappings like Jacob's ladders, oscilloscopes, ham radio equipment and such, you'll notice in the first scene that the contraption used on the captive hunter is actually a photo enlarger attached to a microphone boom. Wood made a number of movies following Bride of the Monster, like Jailbait, by the way, that movie's not about what you think it is, The Violent Years, a film about an all-girl juvenile delinquent gang, and of course Plan 9 from Outer Space. Into the 60s, he eked out a living by writing pornographic novels and writing and crewing nudie movies like Orgy of the Dead. Although the dialogue in Bride of the Monster isn't what's referred to as classic wooden dialogue, there is one speech Bela made that he was quite fond of, the "I have no home" speech, which he once recited to a street full of people while out walking with Wood one day. There's not a whole lot I can tell you about most of the actors in this movie, since for many of them this was the only one they appeared in. Tony McCoy, who plays Lieutenant Dick Craig, appeared in one other movie, 1956's The Naked Gun, and made an appearance on the TV show The Adventures of Rin Tin Tin. He died in 2000. Loretta King, who plays Janet Lawton, never did another film after Bride of the Monster, although she did appear in 2 documentaries, Lugosi, Hollywood's Dracula, and The Haunted World of Edward D. Wood, Jr. Contrary to the story told in Tim Burton's Ed Wood, Loretta never invested any money in the film or claimed to be able to. Wood just hired her to play Janet Lawson because he felt she was a better actress than his current girlfriend, Dolores Fuller, to whom he had promised the role. He did, however, tell Dolores that he'd given the part to King because she had invested in the picture. To this day, Dolores Fuller tells that version of the story, and Loretta King denies it. Harvey B. Dunn, who played Bird Fetish's Captain Tom Robbins, appeared in 14 movies throughout his career, usually playing an old man, a kindly uncle, or a doctor. Among them were other Ed Wood movies such as Night of the Ghouls, The Sinister Urge, and this one. His largest roles were in these films. He died of cirrhosis of the liver on February 21, 1968, in Hollywood, California. Tor Johnson, who plays the mute manservant Lobo, was a professional wrestler in the 1950s, performing under the moniker The Swedish Angel. He appeared in 33 movies over the course of his career, starting with a walk-on in 1934's Registered Nurse, and ending in 1961 when he appeared as the Russian scientist in The Beast of Yucca Flats. He understood English very well, but his pronunciation was an issue, so he usually played mute assistants or brutish thugs. Earlier I mentioned Ed Wood's stock company. It was made up of several actors who regularly appeared in his movies, like Ken Duncan, Duke Moore, Carl Anthony, and Conrad Brooks, but only one of them has a fan club. Paul Marco, who appeared in this and several other films as Kelton the Cop, doubles as not only the object of the club, but as the president of it. If you can track him down, you can be the first in your state to own I Love Kelton the Cop bumper stickers, buttons, and t-shirts. If you're interested in finding out more about Ed Wood, I suggest the book Nightmare of Ecstasy by Rudolph Gray. So right now, slip on your favorite Angora sweater, sit back, relax, and enjoy Bride of the Monster right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.